Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a special from the Basis Project on the late Art Bell, who died during the week, during April 2018. Author and broadcaster, Las Vegas. He came from Pahrump. He is a legend, but he does not and ever has been liked being called a legend. But somebody who we have who is a legend is John Lear. Hello, John Lear. You're on the air.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can see you. How are you doing? Art Bell. I mean, he started off telling everybody what was going on, and it was an amazing event, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, when he first called me, he was broadcasting from the Union Plaza Hotel, or where he had an office with KDON. And I had given a lecture on UFOs at the Spring Valley Library in Las Vegas, and I remember it. I think Spring Valley called me and asked if I wanted to give a lecture. I think that's how it happened. And I remember the lecture was scheduled for 6:30 in the evening, and I got there about 6 to set up some papers and stuff, and there was a guy at the door, and he opened the door, and I looked inside, and there's like 600 people in there, and I backed away, and I said, what's going on? Who are those people for? And he says, they're for you. And
you mean now you were that famous then?
It was shocking. So
yeah.
Anyway, I guess a couple weeks later, he called me, and I don't think may have heard of him, but he had just been talking about sports and news, nothing about UFOs or paranormal. So when I went down there, I sat next to him, and he started interviewing me. And in those days, I wasn't used to doing radio or being interviewed or anything, and so I was reading some of my material, and he kept saying, now don't read. I don't want to hear you read something. Just tell us about it. Well, that was pretty hard to do then because I didn't know the material that well, but over the years, then he had it set up so I could do it from home, and I got more familiar with the material, and we had a lot of really good shows. I remember doing the John Lear test, and I had written that the night before.
But John, how did that actually start? Why were you on air, and why did Art go from just being an ordinary talk show host to getting into this subject? What got the thing going?
Same thing like that happened to George Knapp after the Spring Valley thing.
Now, what was that? That was that conference.
I went down to Channel 8 to pitch Ned Day about UFOs. Now, Ned had been the chief reporter for the Valley Times, which had gone out of business, and Channel 8 scooped him up. He went over there, and I went in and pitched Ned Day. It took me about 30 or 40 minutes to give him all the information I had, and I had a stack of papers. And I got to the end, and he looked at me, he said, John, it's not possible. And I said, well, what do you mean it's not possible? He said, I would have known about it. So I picked up my stuff and I was ready to walk out, and George Knapp had walked through at the exact time that Ned Day had said it's not possible. And as I started walking out, George said, hey, John, do you think I could take a look at that? And I said, sure. And so I handed him all my stuff, and that began George Knapp really not only got interested, but he got all fired up, and that's really what ignited his career. Well, the same thing happened with Art Bell, and I was the first guy to talk
John, was
about
the stuff that
UFOs.
you were talking about the stuff that went into Matrix 1 and Matrix 2? Are you talking about that stuff? Val Valerian, Matrix 1 and Matrix 2?
Yeah, John Grace was a good friend, and that was much earlier. That was at least a year or two before. John worked at Nellis Air Force Base, and he came up, and I was doing a lot of research, and it was driving my wife nuts. So everybody that came to the door, she would chase away, and John Grace was one of those. I mean, he kept coming back, and finally, I let him in, and got to talking, and that developed a long relationship. The Matrix 1, I'm still trying to get a copy from my cousin, who has an original copy.
Now, what is in Matrix 1? This is the stuff about Dulcie,
Yeah,
the
that
aliens.
came right off my desk. Every single piece of paper that was in Matrix 1 came off my desk. Almost the same thing with Matrix 2. And then John moved from Vegas up to Yelm, Washington. And we didn't have much contact after that. But so Ned Day had blown it off. George Knapp picked it up. At the same time, Art Bell called me. And, well, after I gave the papers to George Knapp, he had me on a program called, it was a Sunday program, On the Record.
Now,
And
that is available. That is available in the base's archive. I've got a VHS tape of that here in NTSC. A guy called Ray Wardle gave me that. And it's fascinating stuff. It's really good stuff.
and George called me. It was a Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and I can't remember whether it was the first or second time interview. He said, "John, they're going nuts. The phone has not stopped ringing. What can we do for an encore?" And at that time, I had just met, not just met, but was very close to Bob Lazar. I met Bob Lazar in the summer of 1988, and he didn't want to know anything about UFOs. He said he worked at Los Alamos, and if there had been any truth to it, he would have known it. But we gave him enough information, and there was 3 specific things that we talked about that he was able to verify with his friends who still worked at Los Alamos. And he made the comment to me that he was going to try and get a job up at Area 51. And he called Dr. Teller, who was the father of the H-bomb, who he had met at Los Alamos, and told him that he was going to wanted to re-enter the scientific field, and could he help him? And Dr. Teller said, "Bob, do you want to work with me here in California, or do you want to work in Nevada?" Bob said, "I want to work at Area 51." So the next thing I knew, Bob came over and he said, "I got an interview today." And I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, I aced it." And I said, "Well, what was the deal?" And he said, "Well, they had 3 or 4 scientists there, and they asked me different questions, and I was way ahead of them on every single one of the questions." But anyway, when George Knapp said, "What can we do for an encore?" I suggested Bob Lazar. I said, "I'll call him and see if he'll come on." And I talked to Bob, and at that time, he was worried for his life, and he thought the best thing to do would be to go public and get known, so that if they killed him, there might be some repercussions. So that was a Monday evening. Channel 8 sent up one of those trucks with the satellite antenna, and that videotape I made, George Knapp showed a year or so ago. He didn't know it existed, and I gave it to him, and it had me and Bob and um, Gene Huff standing around waiting for something to happen, and Bob
Now
sitting right.
that's on our interview that we did with Anna Hess about 5 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
You gave that to me. I'm very honored. It's good fun.
Uh,
This is good fun.
this way.
It's really good fun. This.
Yeah. And so that really lit things off. And, at the same time, Art Bell I started about talking about UFOs, and he couldn't believe all the interest it had, all the phone calls he was getting. Same thing with George. He said, I had no idea. We've touched a nerve. There's something that the public wants to know about, and I had no idea. George says, I had no idea that there was any interest in UFOs, and the phone hasn't quit ringing. And so those things happened, the same time. But I did some interviews with Art, and it was a lot of fun. In the middle '90s, though, he gave me a call. I hadn't heard from him in a couple of months. He said, John, I'd like to come over and see you. And I said, oh, okay. So we set up a time, and he drove over from Pahrump, came into my den, sat down. We did some normal chit-chat, and he said, John, look, I'm going to be straight with you. I have a friend that I've known for years. He's a ham radio operator, and he's also a United Airlines pilot. And he has told me, without a doubt, you are heavy into the illegal drug business. Oh my God. So how do you answer something like that? I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, I work as a pilot. I'm a captain with an air cargo company. And I don't know where I'd have the time to deal in illegal drugs. And, we get drug tests not only every 6 months, but randomly. And that doesn't mean that I couldn't have been dealing drugs, but I said, look around, Art, at my den. Does it look like I'm somebody who would be dealing drugs? And we talked for maybe a half an hour, and I don't remember how I answered his question, except, no, I'm not doing that. And I heard from him maybe a couple months later to do a show, and he never, ever mentioned the subject again. And I think I may have once asked him, did you ever hear from his friend? And he never answered me. So I don't know who it was that told him that, but it was so off the wall. It was just crazy. But I'll always remember Art coming over and saying that. And then we came up to 9/11, and I had some ideas, and at the beginning, right after 9/11, I was considering that it possible was airplanes. I actually believed it, but I'm saying, I couldn't have done that at the height of my career and ability. I couldn't have hit a target 208 feet wide.
Now, John, if you tell people what your ability was, for people who don't know, you are one of the most brilliant pilots ever flown. You've had more classifications of flight. You are an absolute legend in this. So why should people pay any attention to a guy like you? Tell us why. Tell us why you're such a brilliant guy at a pilot.
Why?
Well, so people understand why the hell those planes couldn't be what they allegedly were.
A couple of weeks ago, I heard my wife on the phone in her office in our living room, and I heard her tell somebody that, John, there's now 3 people that have as many FAA certificates as John. And I thought, that's interesting. I never heard that, but I've never talked to the FAA in years. And so I wrote him a letter, and I said, and I addressed it to the Airman Certificate Branch in Oklahoma City, and I said, can you tell me who has the most certificates and the names of the people that have the most certificates. And I got an email back, and it said, you're the only one that has the most certificates, and you have 9. And so that was interesting to hear. I sent that to my wife, never heard back, but I'm the one that has the most FAA certificates, and nobody will ever achieve that because it just took too long and too many things fell into place. It would be actually impossible today for somebody to do that, mainly because there's one certificate that I don't think they even give anymore, and that's the navigator certificate. And because of the influx of GPS, there'd be no reason ever to have a navigator unless the entire global positioning system was knocked out, which is a possibility, but the fact is I don't think they offer those certificates anymore. So anyway, when George, let's see, who was it? What story I was telling about the?
You were talking about 9/11, and
9/11,
you questioned the validity of the aircraft, and you're saying that they couldn't have been flown in there.
I said at the height of my career, I couldn't have hit an object 208 feet wide, 800 feet from the ground, and 460 miles an hour. It's just impossible. And I went into all the reasons why. And I said for a hijacker to subdue a pilot is ridiculous. I mean, if he did, let's say he cut his throat and there's blood all over the place, how's he going to get him out of the seat? He has to get his seatbelt undone, and a hijacker is not going to know how to undo a seatbelt. And I said there's just too many parts of that story that doesn't make sense. There's blood all over the place. If he slit his throat or incapacitated himself, how, there's going to be blood all over the place. What's he going to hold on to, assuming he can get the pilot out of the seat, which he can't. He doesn't know how to work the seat. The seat's electrical, and you have to know exactly where to put your fingers to make that seat move back and forth or up and down. And in order to get somebody out of the pilot out of the seat, you'd have to make the seat come back. Then you'd have to figure out how to take off his seatbelt and shoulder harness, and then how to get him out of that seat and into the companionway, and then get yourself in the seat and get the seat forward and then start flying. It's just ridiculous. It didn't make any sense. So shortly after, on the internet or somehow, somebody started talking about no planes, and I thought, man, that's nuts. No planes? Then what did we see? But it took me a few months to figure out, yep, there were no planes. Those are holograms, whether anybody believes it. I remember at the time I was posting on Above Top Secret, and I was one of the 8 top conspiracy guys on Above Top Secret, and my populator was going up and up and up until they kicked me off. They couldn't just have somebody.
Why did they kick you off? What did you do wrong, John? What on earth would you do wrong?
The main specific thing that I did wrong was I told them the Billy Meyer case was true. And they couldn't stand it. I mean, they went nuts. They said, oh, no, we have proof. He made up all that stuff and he faked everything. I said, no, I have too many friends that have been over there, talked to Billy Meyer, seen the film. I gave the film to Bob Lazar. He looked at it and he said, that's true. That part can't be faked. So, but
who are the people that you talked to? Some good people. One of them's passed away as well. He ran the UFO Congress.
Pardon?
He was part of the key people at the International UFO Congress. I forget his name. He passed away. He's a pilot. Was he what you're talking about?
I don't remember who you're talking about.
God, I can't remember either.
But
he's one of the most famous people in the UFO subject, and I can't remember.
Oh. Anyway, Above Top Secret, they didn't want to hear about it, and they didn't want to hear about the Billy Meyer case being true, so they They kicked me off at first, unceremoniously, and then they invited me back, and I never went back. The head guy, I think his name is King Septic or something like that, and he's just an idiot. And what happened was, the reason they were like that is they had needed some financing, and they got some heavy bucks invested in their company, and apparently one of the provisions of giving them that money was there certain things that they had to comply with, and one was to say that the Billy Myers case was untrue.
I mean, this is heavy weather because there were two major UFO groups U.S. groups which went to Billy Meyer to specifically debunk the case. And I still can't remember the guy. Bob Brown explained all this to us at the UFO Congress. The pilot. I cannot. He's loads of photographs of UFOs. He investigated the Billy Meyer case. It was true, and then two major UFO organizations from the States were made to basically debunk that. In fact, there was competition who could debunk it better.
Yeah, it really was a pain in the butt for the United States government, who was trying to debunk UFOs, because the pictures were so clear. And when I first heard about the Billy Myers case in 1980, when the big picture books came out, I couldn't believe it. And even on one of my the first George Knapp interview on the record, he asked me about the Billy Myers case, and I said, "Oh, that's fake. Billy Myers doesn't have the negatives to prove of what he saw." And I got a phone call after the show at home, and the guy said, "John, you ought to look into that thing, because that is real. That's true."
It's Wendell Stevens. Thanks to the chat room. It's Wendell Stevens who had
Wendell.
those. Yeah, Wendell. The late Wendell Stevens. Excellent, brilliant man.
The late Wendell, we went through that business where one of the people that worked at S4 had gone to Wendell's house, contacted him, gave him a bunch of information, and supposedly had deposited some photos he took at S4 in the locker room at the bus depot at the Union Plaza. And Wendell had called me, and he said, "John, I need you to pick me up at the airport at McCarran and take me down to the Union Plaza. I've got to check something out." And I picked him up, and we drove down there, and we got out, and we started walking around the lockers, and we couldn't find the locker number. And so there was a guy standing there kind of in charge of the lockers, and we said, "We're looking for this number." And he said, "Oh, you know what? About 2 weeks ago, they came in, and they took all the lockers out and put in new ones, and it's all different numbers." And so then I took Wendell back to the airport, and I didn't see him again before he passed away. But that was that story. But Bub Talk Secret, I went to, after they kicked me off, I went somewhere else, and different websites talking about.
I thought you said that the reason why you were kicked off that site was because you mentioned on a Coast show, I think with George Norrie, that they were CIA, and they got very annoyed about that.
You mentioned what?
That they were backed by a very important company called the CIA.
Oh, that Above Top Secret was?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they had that guy named Green, who was ex-CIA, and he was supposedly giving him the inside scoop, and all he was doing was bad-mouthing the Billy Meyer case. So, I couldn't refute that, and we just came to a parting of the ways. But
You put my UFO up there, the one I saw in Ireland. You put that
Yeah.
massive spaceship up there. You put that up. So what else? What happened to you those days?
That spaceship that you drew is still much in the news. I posted it a lot on Facebook. As a matter of fact, I posted it last week. And the reason that's important is because the Navy just announced their new submarine, the USS Colorado, and they said it included some really fantastic innovations, which they neglected to tell the public what they were. And I told them what they are is, number one, the new submarines used fusion engines instead of fission, and the public is told that fusion won't be around for another decade because there's just no way to control it. And that's not true. Fusion engines have been used at least for the last 7, if not maybe 10 years.
That's cold fusion engines.
Yeah.
Cold fusion engines.
The reason the fusion engines are so, well, they're 10 times more powerful than fission, but they're also 10 times as lighter. So whereas an aircraft carrier uses 5 fission reactors, they can do the same thing with 2 or 3 fission reactors. And
fusion reactors,
on the submarine, they can use 2 where they would only had room for 1 before. So in addition to that, the new aircraft carriers and new submarines use a material for the hull called D.D. And D.D is a material that's lighter than steel, lighter than titanium, stronger by a magnitude of both, and very light, and can carry an electrical charge. And the reason that's important is because by introducing an electrical charge on this material, it can keep the seawater from 3 to 7 meters away from the hull.
That's a slipstream effect.
No effect at all.
That's
and so, as we know, the maximum speed for a displacement hull boat is 1.34 times the square root of the water line. Well, since there's no water line, because the D.D is keeping the water away, the speed is virtually unlimited, and the submarines can go maybe 100 to 125 knots. Same thing with an aircraft carrier. Using that D.D and introducing electrical charge, they can go through the water, maybe 80, even 100 knots, which is unbelievable for an aircraft carrier. And I've talked to people that have served on new aircraft carriers, and I say, how do they deal with that? And he said, well, for one thing, if they've got to go somewhere, they make everybody go below decks because they say the weather's going to be bad, and not to look out because the weather's going to be bad, and so that's how they keep them from seeing how fast they're going. Now,
yeah, but they'd be blown off, wouldn't they? 100 knots. They'd be blown off the ship if they were traveling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's why they don't want them up there, but they don't want them to know that. And of course, to get someplace 5 or 6 times faster than they normally would, there's a lot of questions. But when you're in the Navy, you don't ask questions like that because you're going to find yourself out real soon. So that's how the Navy deals with that. But the reason that the spaceship you drew was important is because the Navy has orbiting manufacturing plants, and this D.D has to be made in 0 gravity. And when they make these huge panels, they have to be brought down from space. And because you said that space plane was 10 times bigger than 747, I figured that's where they're putting those panels in. And they come down, they land at Machrihanish, or someplace close to Machrihanish, and then they ship the panels from Machrihanish. Now, the British use that on their new boats, and then it's shipped to the U.S. For the use on new submarines. Now there's a even newer submarine, and I don't know the name of it. It's used for SEAL delivery, the Sea and Lear teams, and it's about 70 feet long. It needs a crew of 9. It has a 12-team SEAL lockout, which means that there's a lockout system on the submarine that they can put 12 SEAL team members in there and let them out underwater or above water or wherever, and through this SEAL team lockout. And in addition to this submarine, it's fission powered, and not only that, they used to, they have developed propellers to a fine art, but now I don't think they use propellers anymore. They use magnetohydrodynamics, and this was first introduced to the public in that movie called The Hunt for Red October.
Yeah, Hunt for Red October. Yeah.
The Hunt for Red October. They called it a caterpillar drive that the Russians had developed, and actually that's one that we had developed, and it's a way of using water under extremely high pressure to propel the submarine, and that's on this SEAL delivery unit that they have. And so I posted a story about a week ago on Facebook, and I drew a picture, not to scale, of this new SEAL delivery system.
Does any of this material come from Atlantis, but Antarctica? There's a lot of stuff coming out of Antarctica. Ancient technology dug up and being reused. What do you say about that? Well, the Grid Keeper is on the chat room, and he'll be joining us on the phone in about 15 minutes.
So much interesting stuff from coming out of Antarctica, but just in the way of information. I never heard of anything specific coming out of Antarctica. There's some stories that Linda Howe has introduced about stuff going on there, but I have no inroads, or I don't know anybody that works there has given me any specific information. The other day, somebody asked me about the Giant of Kandahar, and the Giant of Kandahar was seen in 2002, and they had a military team operating out of Kandahar in Afghanistan into previously unknown areas or unexplored areas, and in one of these very steep canyons, they were following this little trail and came upon a cave, and there was a giant, 15 feet tall, red hair, red beard, and very agile. Well, you'd think somebody 15 feet tall would probably be hard to even walk, but this guy was like a ballet dancer. He could move so quickly and fluidly, and he had a big spear, and without these military team even realizing it, the giant took the spear and speared one of the military teams and held him up in the air, and they were all, pretty frightened, and they started shooting, and they weren't killing him, and somebody in the team said, shoot for the head, and they finally were able to kill him. He fell down. They radioed Kandahar, told them what was happening, and Kandahar sent, I think it was a CH-47 helicopter, or a big helicopter anyway, and since it couldn't land up there because it was in the middle of a very steep canyon on the side of the wall of the canyon, and so they lowered a net, and they had the people on the ground load the giant into the net, secured it into the net, flew it back to Kandahar, Then it was flown by C-130 to Frankfurt, Germany, and then from there to obviously to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and never heard anything about it. But this subject came up a couple of months ago, and I started looking into it. I called one of the people who really researched giants in the United States. I forget his name. Very informed. And I asked him about the giant of Kandahar, and he said he didn't believe it. He said that he had seen the interviews, and he realized what they were saying, but he personally didn't believe it. But I believe it, and it's interesting. We posted a little bit about it on the Living Moon, and I think we're going to post a little bit about the black goo, but I'm trying to get Ron Schmidt to look at the videotape you sent us on the black goo.
Yeah, that was a guy called John Dallimore, who's a British military explosives expert, the Royal Marines, and he was responsible for being part of moving 400 crates of that out of Thule Island in the Falklands War. Tell us about your favorite shows with art.
Well, my favorite one was the one about the test. And like I say, I had written that the night before, and I came up with the idea just by accident, and it took me about an hour to write the whole thing, and did some changes with it or modified it, and then the next day did it on the Art Bell show, and I couldn't believe the interest that it drew. I mean, it went worldwide. People just went nuts over the Lear test, and still today, people talk about the Lear test, and I've got to rewrite the thing for some of the information that I found out since then. But
I mean, briefly for the people who haven't heard it, what does it mean? What is the test? What are they going to say?
The Lear test was I said that the people who were in charge of the UFO cover-up were to the point where they were having trouble keeping it a secret, and they wondered what would happen if they told the public. And they thought, well, I'll tell you what, why don't we tell the whole truth to Art Bell, because he seems to have the heart and soul of the public on paranormal stuff. Let's tell him really what's going on and see what he recommends. And so I go into the whole story, how that, the UFOs showed up in the late 1800s and throughout World War I and World War II, and they had actually had several of the flying saucers recovered at the time of the Roswell incident. And people think the Roswell incident was the first recovery. It wasn't. It was way down the line, and that's why they were so well organized. I mean,
there were lots of recoveries. There was Marconi was brought in. There were European ones. There were landings in England. All that. They're all over the place before the so-called Roswell.
And they were flying them back from England on the. They had it secured on the wing of a B-17. And a little interesting side story the other day on my Facebook page. Somebody showed up and said that he worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for 38 years as a scientist, and was willing to tell me anything, answer any question I had. So I wrote him back and I said, well, one thing I'd like to know is how many feet under Wright-Patterson, and how many stories, and how big is the storage area under Wright-Patterson? Tell me a little bit about that. And so he wrote back, he said, well, do you have any proof that there's something like that? And I said, I don't have any time for your fucking bullshit. And I blocked him, never heard from him again. But, to say to me, do you have any proof for the area? Obviously, he was sent to feed me full of bullshit. And when I asked him something specific, something that's so obvious, and then he says, "Oh well, hey, do you have any proof of that?" That was hilarious.
Well, you had a visit. You had a visit during the year from Duncan, and we're going to get him to call in a couple of minutes, and maybe you can talk together about the so-called disclosure side of things. I mean, if Duncan wants to call the phone now, we can set the call up. But what do you think about disclosure? What do you think that's going to be? I mean, how are people that's been lying to us for the last 70 to 80 years ever going to suddenly be believed as telling us the truth?
Never, never, never will there be any disclosure. There won't be anything close to disclosure. And this moron, Senator Harry Reid, senator from Nevada, has just retired as a senator. And he has cooked up this scam that he cooked up with Bob Bigelow. And they went to the Pentagon and they said, look, we'd like to investigate UFOs and we'll take the heat off you so that you don't have to say anything that you know, but if you'll give us $22 million, we'll be the UFO researchers. And Harry Reid said, I'll be Mr. Disclosure. Well, the thing is, Harry Reid, all he wants is a free lunch. And the reason he needs a free lunch is because he's gotten a free lunch for his last 30 years as his position as a senator from the state of Nevada. And he's used to that free lunch. But now he's retired, he doesn't get a free lunch. So he cooked up this deal where they got the $22 million from the Pentagon. He gave it to his friend Bob Bigelow. Bob Bigelow has been involved in UFOs since he was a little kid. And as a matter of fact, after Bob Lazar quit working up at S4, he and Bob Lazar went into a business called Zeta Reticuli 2. It was Nevada Corporation, and I recently posted the corporate papers and the application for EIN certificate. But it only lasted a very short time, and the reason was because Bob Bigelow envisioned putting money into a little laboratory. It was a little laboratory space over near McCarran Field, and he was going to fill it full of the stuff that Bob needed: computers, all kinds of scientific equipment and measuring equipment, and all kinds of stuff. And his idea was that he would set Bob Lazar up. Bob Lazar would be working there 8 hours a day, and Bigelow could take his friends over and show him the little scientist that worked for him and all the cool stuff he was making. Whereas what Bob Lazar thought about this idea was that as soon as the equipment was being unloaded into this little laboratory, he would take it over to his house and do what he wanted with the equipment. And that didn't set well with Bob Bigelow. So they came to a parting of the ways, and nothing was ever heard of that again. And then, so the next time Bob Bigelow surfaces is when he bought the ranch in Utah with all this crazy paranormal stuff going on, and then recently hooking up with Harry Reid to be Mr. and Mrs. Disclosure, and they were going to uncover the information on UFOs. But it's all just a scam. It's to take the heat off the Pentagon, because the Pentagon has been collecting UFO information for the past 70 years. They have at least 60 different UFOs. They have at least 100 bodies of at least 8 different types of extraterrestrials. They deal daily with real flesh and blood extraterrestrials, and they don't want the public to know anything about that.
Well, we've got Duncan, the grid keeper, on the phone. Duncan, can you hear John Lear?
Hello, John.
Hello, Duncan.
Great. Well, tell us all about your visit to John Lear and what happened.
I agree with John about disclosure. I think it's just... I'm not going to swear. To remind myself not to swear because we're live. I think it's just a joke, disclosure. I really do. I don't think they're ever going to want to tell us anything. Just how I feel about it. I've had enough of hearing about disclosure. You know, I think
well, what did you discuss with John, the pair of you, when you were over there, Duncan?
Sorry?
What did you discuss with John Lear?
Oh, we mainly talked about the Wilson spaceships and the moon footage, and things like that, really. Yeah, but it was interesting hearing John talk about Above Top Secret, because I think that's where we met John. Above Top Secret and Open Minds Forum. And they, I remember there was a guy called Santiago.
It was a pleasure to have Duncan here visiting, and he's been so instrumental in exposing some of the orbiting direct energy weapons and other stuff. His service has been invaluable for what he's doing, and it was really a pleasure and an honor to have him visit me in Las Vegas.
Well, thank you, John. It was an honour to be there. It was the holiday of my life, I can tell you. It was great.
But what about the disclosure from the Committee of 300 and MJ12 and all that sort of stuff you were talking about?
I just think are you talking to me or John?
Both. Well, that's what you allegedly...
I just think it's a big carrot. It's been going on for so long. You know, and there's that thing when I was talking with Ron and John about, you know, all the things we know. We don't know a lot. You know, we all think we know a lot, and you can go along life thinking you found out everything, but really you still know nothing, because there's so many levels of everything, including the alien thing. And since I've come back from John's, I've probably learned more about the world in the last 8 months than I have in the last 10 years. Now you're going to ask me what I've learned.
Well, what have you learned? What have you learned?
I'll tell you. You'll have to do another interview, and I'll tell you what I've learned, probably around June or July, because remember you read out that thing I talked about, the crystals, Miles.
Yeah, about the crystals.
That needs to come back out in around June, and I'm going to start saying a lot of things.
Well, what do you think about that, John Lear, about crystals and that energy stuff?
Well, the crystals I'm talking about, they're not standard crystals. They're not the shops you go into a shop and... Well, they are, but it's what's in them. There's something in them that no one in the world has seen before, and it's a game changer.
Well, what did you discuss when you were with John? And you I mean, I know John Walston got John's telescope to work. What about that?
Yeah, in the matter of about 10 seconds, which was quite clever. Is your telescope okay, John?
It's fantastic. I can't believe, it had been inoperative for about 6 years, and you guys came in and fixed it in about 10 seconds. It was really nice.
Yeah, Marcel helped with that. He was really good. Yeah. But one of the most interesting things, Miles, was looking through John's pictures on his wall.
Well, I noticed your wall has changed, John. Yeah, the John Lear's lair seems to have changed a little bit. Or are you just on a different computer?
Recently I had a picture of the moon on one wall. I've taken it down and I put up some of the I think about 20 of the pictures that came off the Bruce Says All video. Now, Bruce Swartz is the one that has figured out a way to penetrate the holograph that covers the moon. And when we look up at the moon, we see a gray, and we see what look like to be craters. All you're looking at is a holograph. That's not what's there. But Bruce was able to figure out how to penetrate that holograph, and it's just amazing. All of the buildings and cities and areas and roads and passageways and tunnels and bridges and everything else that's up there. And to tell you how significant it is, I had these. I copied some of these, and I'm getting them ready to post on this one on the back of the photo that I originally had on the moon, and I had them laid out on the table. And Marilee comes in, and my wife, and she doesn't usually believe any of this stuff, and she says, "What's that? What are those buildings?" I said, "Well, that's the moon, but that's taken with a telescope that can penetrate the holograph." And she went nuts. She said, "Unbelievable." And usually she doesn't believe anything, but she looked at that, and now everybody that comes to the house, she takes them in and says, look at these pictures of what John has. And I said, well, those are the ones that came off Bruce Schwartz's video, and they are fantastic. Now, these are the ones that were taken with a 12-inch telescope, and now he's working with a 14-inch telescope.
Is there something that people could see somewhere where that is?
I have a little trouble walking, but I'll get a couple of those things in.
Okay, well, while you do that, I'll get Duncan can keep talking. Okay, go ahead, Duncan. We're talking about what you had achieved over there when you were over there with John, and you were talking to some very important people, which is.
I was supposed to meet Bill Tompkins.
Yeah.
I spoke to him on the phone, and then he died. It was quite sad, actually.
Is that because you spoke to him on the phone?
You're not the first person who said that. I hate to think that, but I spoke to his wife, and she was.
Okay, what was the point of that? This was a really important situation that you were over there. For people who don't know who Duncan is, you're the backstory with James Casbolt and his other colleagues and a few other things, and Max. You knew Max. Do you want to say anything about Max while you're on?
Not yet. Ask me in June. Ask me after I've been to Canterbury Cathedral about Max. Not been up there yet. But no, I was at Probe UFO conference in 2006. And someone said, you want to go and talk to that chap over there? And it was James. And he gave me that CD that he made about Windsors and Satanism. And I listened to it on the way home. And our friend, it was Michael Chittum. He did an interview with Dave Starbuck, and Michael Chittum was advisor to John F. Kennedy. And he came over and took James and I up to Balmoral Castle to stop some satanic rituals from happening, which I don't think we did because we got caught in the castle by the police. It was quite a thing. And then chased 10 miles across Scotland by MI6 in a Range Rover, which was quite exciting. But yeah, everything changed after that, really, and I became good friends with James, and we shared our own experiences, and that's why I always stuck by him, because I've spent time with him, I've seen things, and there's the whole thing at Peasmore.
And what about Peasmore? You find Peasmore. Maybe that's for another time, but
yeah, in a nutshell, Barry gave me a copy of all his documents, and on the back he said, if you don't believe any of this, go and have a look. So we went and had a look. And the TR-3B flew over us. I filmed it. I've given you the footage. It's rubbish footage, but you see it on there for a split second.
Okay, we've got John Lear just coming up. He's now got some exciting stuff about to show us, and we're going to see that now.
8 o'clock position. These are kind of crinkled here, but this was...
You can't see this, Duncan, but we're looking at a picture of the moon.
I can see it.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Right.
Got you on the computer muted.
It'll be a couple of seconds later. Okay.
That's down so, and that was taken with the lunar orbiter pictures, and that's obviously a huge city. You can't see how clear it is now, but if you were to hear, you can actually see one of the McDonald franchises up there. on one of the corners of Damo's house.
McDonald's.
Now, here is here's some of the photos.
I think there's some people felt that the McDonald's thing was a joke. Yeah, continue.
Is right. That was taken from Bruce Swartz's video, and that's up by Sinus Iridum at the northern part of the moon, where he's found so many of these huge areas of stuff that's going on. There's another area here. Huge buildings and bridges and roadways and stuff that's going on. Obviously, NASA tells us there's no atmosphere. Obviously, there is an atmosphere. It's about the gravity is 70% that of Earth, not 1/6 as they say. And none of these buildings are dome-shaped, which means it has normal atmosphere. So,
I mean, that looks just like an area, like a normal city in the States or anywhere normal.
Yeah, these are just fantastic photos. And then just go to Bruce Says All. It's BruceSaySall, Bruce Says All, on YouTube, or he has a website. And he has just some fantastic pictures there.
Now, it's important that some of the developments at Portendown here in the UK were there for the use of creating beings for use on Britain's lunar base. What do you say about that, John?
Britain's lunar base?
Well, they're providing personnel, some kind of developed personnel for use on the lunar base. I'm not saying, I shouldn't have said it was Britain's lunar base, but they were developing a special kind of being for use on the base.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether they've got the permission of the people up there. There's 3 billion people that live on the moon. They're humans just like us, but they're far, far more advanced. In our solar system, NASA tells us we have 9 planets. Actually, there's 40 planets. And all of those planets have one or more civilizations, and all of those planets have one or more moons, and all of those moons have one or more civilizations. And there's so much going on in our solar system, it's absolutely unbelievable. Our minds can simply not comprehend how much is going on out there. And we're just here, we're the, on planet Earth, we're just the backward civilization. And actually they take trips from the other planets to look at the zoo, the Earth Zoo, the people that are still fighting one another, and they fly around and watch our wars and stuff like that. We have no idea what's going on, and the reason we're here on Earth is because over our past lifetimes, and all of us have lived hundreds of lifetimes. Miles, you've lived hundreds. I've lived hundreds. Duncan has lived hundreds. And in our last lifetime, apparently we made a mistake, and we're here on Earth to rectify that mistake. And the way that we rectify it is to learn how to live with integrity, without envy, without hate, without greed, and to express our love to our families each and every day. And that's all we have to do here. We're not here to change the world. We're not here to change our friends. We're not here to improve the bad guy. We're here just to change ourselves. So, and until we can do that, we're not going to be allowed into outer space. And that's why the ETs put the Van Allen belt out there, so that we can't go anywhere without their express permission. And going to the moon, of course, was out of the question. First of all, there's no room for us there. Second of all, all the stuff that the pictures they had of the moon are fake, and the reason is because the daytime sky is a saffron yellow. It's not black. and the gravity is 70% that of Earth's gravity. So all their hippity hopping around at half speed was sheer baloney, and it was just to make the public think that we had that kind of technology. But more important, it was to take the $40 billion that was allegedly spent on the space program and put it into a program that they wanted.
Well, what about the spacecraft that John Wilson saw? I remember when I visited you, you were talking about John Wilson's huge craft that he was seeing, and I know John was there with Duncan. What about those huge spacecrafts in orbit, those secret spaceships or whatever they are? Whose ships are they?
Yeah, they're, it all started at the end of World War II. The United States was trying to develop the atomic bomb at Los Alamos, and Germany was trying to develop their atomic bomb. And the United States could make the initiator, they could make everything in the bomb, except they could not make the plutonium that was needed. Now, whereas Germany, they couldn't make the initiator or anything else, but they could make the plutonium. So 3 months before the end of World War II, when Germany knew that it was all over, they were going to lose, they came to the United States and they said, look, we'll give you the plutonium you need to finish your bomb and bomb Japan. All we ask is that at the end of the war, you let in 4,000 of our Nazi scientists and give them citizenship, no questions asked, full citizenship and privileges, which we agreed to do. And so that was Operation Paperclip. It was organized by John Foster Dulles, who was Secretary of State, Allen Dulles, his brother, who was head of the CIA, and Eleanor Dulles, their sister, who was head of the United States Berlin desk in Berlin. And between the three of them, they're the ones that let at least 4,000 Nazi scientists in. And of course, the Nazis got into the United States and started taking over everything. The first thing they did is they took over NACA, NACA, made it NASA, National Air and Space Administration, and Nazis have always been at the top of that heap. And they took over Bell Helicopter, instigated the Gulf of Tonkin scam and the Vietnamese War just to sell helicopters. And then they had the space scam to raise $40 billion that they spent on stuff that they wanted. And the stuff that they wanted were the direct energy weapons. I think we have 15 of them that are orbiting, and they're used to control and control people the way they want. For instance, the collapse of Building 1 and 2 on 9/11 was with direct energy weapons. It had nothing to do with airplanes.
Yeah, but what about the fires? The fires in California? Direct energy weapons then?
They were started with direct energy weapons, and those are for the, what did they call that, Agenda 21 or whatever?
Agenda 21, yeah.
Yeah. And so they've got their own agenda going, and they're in complete control. What I'm working on now is trying to figure out the connection between Nazis and the Jews, and there is a connection there. We've always been told that they're, that they were enemies. The Holocaust with 6 million Jews exterminated, pure bullshit. There isn't a shred of evidence that ever happened.
Of course,
maybe
we're now entering an area of plausible deniability and getting banned off YouTube. But any grounds for that information, John? I mean, what you? This is Holocaust denial can get us banned, but it's your show. We're talking about Art Bell. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's pure BS. what it was is to hide the coalition between the Jews and the Germans, and it's that coalition that is in charge of the United States at this moment.
Exactly.
Hitler,
In what detail exactly? Because a lot of people are being conned on this, and we're using very triggered terms here. In what detail are you talking about? We've got Michael Shrimpton on, who writes for Veterans Today, talking about this, a secret German intelligence agency called the DVD. There's an awful lot of stuff that we're being told is a complete lie. But what are you talking about in detail here?
for instance, what are you asking?
Well, the term Jew is a broad term. There are different sub-characters within that, which are very important to distinguish, and we want to be very careful. So we want to pick things very carefully here, so we don't insult a lot of people who were killed in World War II and other times. But what are you really saying here, precisely, if you can?
Well, what I'm really saying is there's a coalition, not a brotherhood, but a coalition between the Germans and the Jews. And Hitler did not commit suicide. Of course, he left after World War II, lived in Antarctica for a while, then went up to Argentina and lived there for a while, the whole time running what was going on in the U.S., and he eventually died in the United States in a hospital there in 1968, still, pretty much in charge of all the stuff that was going on. And the stuff going on is the Nazis coalition with the Jews running pretty much what's going on. That's why when we hear that Israel is so adamant in getting the U.S. to do different stuff. For instance, Project Yinon, Y-I-N-O-N, started in 1979 specifically to make the United States believe that Muslims were a threat. And that's why they said Muslims were flying those airplanes that destroyed the buildings in 9/11. Pure bullshit. Had nothing to do with that. What Israel was trying to do was to get us, the United States, and the people in the United States go into the Middle East and attack their enemies, the Israel's enemies, the 9 Muslim states that they consider enemies.
And then Russia, and then attack Russia. Is that not the next thing to attack Russia?
No, I don't think. Well, I don't think so, because the United States and Russia have been allies ever since the end of World War II, and also before the end of World War II. We've always been friends. All this stuff about the Cold War was pure bullshit. There was never any Cold War. There was never any threat about Russia launching nuclear missiles or us protecting. All the stuff about Strategic Air Command, all pure bullshit to make the public interested or scared about something that was going on so that they didn't think about UFOs. That's all the Cold War was about. So there's never been any threat from Russia, never going to be any threat from Russia.
Duncan, do you have anything to say on that from James Casbolt's side or your side?
Sorry, I've just walked out the room to go to the loo. I've just come back in.
Okay, I'll fade you. Okay. Right, okay.
I'm kind of running out of gas here. I'm going to have to beg off.
Okay,
if,
well...
it's okay with you.
Well, thank you very much, John Lear. And I'm not entirely sure... Is that your... Whoa, we got...
For some reason, your sound's not coming through, but if you're saying goodbye.
Thank you very much, John Lear. Thank you very much, John Lear. It's good to hear. It's good to hear you. And can you hear me now? Yeah. We've got a lot of dogs barking. Are the dogs gone?
What?
How are the dogs? Dogs. Well,
I can't hear.
I think it's funny that. Okay, you can't hear me. No. Hello, John. Can you hear me?
just barely.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Well, it's interesting that things sort of fall apart at that point. Thank you very much, John Lear. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Okay, goodbye for now. Thank you, John Lear. Well, that's interesting. We'll say goodbye. It all fell apart there. The grid keeper was able to... I'll just see if the grid keeper's still there. Are you still there, John? Duncan?
Duncan. Still here.
Okay, well, it seems all the dogs went haywire on that particular point. Have you got anything finally to say yourself?
Yeah. The whole thing with spaceships and the moon and Wilson and I don't work together anymore because I just don't have time to be involved in all that anymore. But he has developed another telescope. He's been donated a telescope, and he can now look at the moon closer than anyone's ever seen it in the films that we've already put up over the last 10 years. So he's working on that now, and by summer there'll be some very, very, very close shots of the moon surface. So if anyone hasn't looked recently, go and have a look on his YouTube channel. He's put one up last week, and you'll see the clarity of it. It's really good, really good.
And what is his YouTube channel?
I think it's just John Leonard Wilson.
Okay, well, there's a hell of a thunderstorm happening here, all happening here. The lightning's...
There is here as well.
Yeah, and you are where? Are you down in Chichester?
I'm in Chichester. I'm in Chichester.
Chichester, yeah. Wow, well, that's a heck of a thunderstorm flying here, and we're about 150 miles apart as the crow flies.
I think it's the whole of the south of England, mate.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll talk again when I'm ready to talk about my crystals.
Good. We'll do that.
We'll do it. We'll get that stuff out there, and that's going to help a lot of people if they want to be involved in it. But,
and
yeah, big game changer. This is what's coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
but let's just say, since I got involved in that, there's been not one helicopter come over my house. Funny that. They all leave me alone.
Wow.
Yeah, they leave me alone big time, mate.
No, this is really... do you want to basically... No, we'll talk about that later. Maybe in vision.
Another time. Yeah, another time.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Duncan. We'll
thanks
end this...
for listening.
Okay, thank you,
right,
Duncan.
cheers,
okay,
mate.
good
Bye.
night. Well, that's it for this little special we've done by John Lear. Ever controversial, important stuff. And in those days, in 1993, it really is one heck of a storm here. I don't know if we're going to lose the line. In those days, in 1993, I knew a very brave British UFO researcher called Ray Wardle. And he introduced me to all the stuff that we're talking about. He got me those interviews that John was talking about, George Knapp. I've got them here on VHS. And he went through a hell of a time at the very first conference that I went to in the States, the International UFO Congress at the Showboat Hotel. And he went through hell. And before that, I shot a video with him listening to Art Bell. I think it was on Dreamland. I think it was Dreamland. The show was Dreamland then. November 1993. So, in order to remember the late Art Bell, my hero, he didn't like being called a legend. He just wanted to be a professional journalist doing his thing. So, as the rain pours down here on the 21st of April, after we've had John Lear talking in his good old style, never shirking from controversy, let's listen to the way it was like as it was before it became Coast to Coast, just to Art Bell on the radio, going through the streets of Las Vegas to close out on this Spaces special with about Art Bell. So let's listen to Art Bell on the radio, courtesy of A Drive Through Las Vegas with Ray Wardle.
past the Mirage and you'll see the a volcano erupting every half hour or hour or whatever it is. Whatever, right? Over the fact that I knew where to go to videotape sources or to see them, because I did know where they were, wasn't consciously aware of it. And at first I was thinking about it, I thought, nah. But something happened about 3 weeks ago, which I did. Brad can tell you. He said to me, boy, he said, have you ever read a book called The Watchers? I said, no. So he said, I've got it at home, I'll bring it. Because what I described was exactly from The Watchers, right? Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't, see? Now, what I did was, listen, I was looking at the cats because I was looking for something in the cupboards, couldn't find it. The cat went up, right, listen, and knocked it with its nose and knocked it out the cupboard. And I thought, nah, you know, it was coincidence. And to be honest, I was a little high, actually. So that's why I didn't take too much notice. And then I sort of sobered myself up a bit and I thought, let me have a go here with a couple of other things. Do you know something? The cat went and did exactly what I thought. I did it in pictures, okay? Not listening, are you?
I am. To every word.
And the cat went to everything which I thought of, and it was incredible. So I then said, Mona was there, and I said to Mona, you know, I just thought of something. Maybe the cat can communicate with me. So I let my mind go blank, and I tell you something, it was like tripping. I see these little things dancing, like there's a lot of green in it for a start off, and I was a little bit frightened to let go, to be honest with you, because it was like, whoa. It was like a hallucination type thing, and there was all these little people doing these little silly jigs and dances, you know, like, my best way of describing it would be like little leprechauns, yeah? Hello?
Yeah. I'm listening.
It was the Dunes, look. There's the other tower still there, of course. Right? And Mona got angry. And I was talking, I was going, why does it upset you? Now listen to this. Whatever the thought was coming into my head told me to write it down, Miles. I've got the writing, it's not my handwriting either.
Yeah. What do you mean it's not your handwriting?
Well, I'm just telling you. It's because Mona weren't going to accept what was coming from it. She thought it was me, and it wasn't. I had no control over it. I was standing back watching, but I was speaking in my voice, all right?
So when did all this happen?
About 3 weeks ago. And so it said, write it down. So I got a piece of paper, and I put down, I'll tell you exactly what it says. Thought is just the index. Right, make of that what you want. And then I started writing. And then I could remember being worried about, because I wasn't looking at the paper, by the way. No, I wasn't looking at the paper. And I was bothered about what, the writing can't be joined, right? And it says on there, I'm not even worried, it says, don't worry about the handwriting, yours is a lot worse.
Yeah, they do have a sense of humour.
This was funny. Yeah, it made me laugh. It did have a sense of humour all the time.
Yeah, it's good. It's good when it has a sense of humour because then you're dealing with something good then.
And anyway, I can show you the paper. It's at home. My wife got absolutely hot. And shall I tell you what? Her face changed. My wife's face changed. Not physically, but...
Her expression?
Yes. Like all of a sudden the eyes got dark. All dark, like black eyes.
What you're saying about how they...
Yeah. And it was like she was like spitting. That's the impression I got. It was like, fuck, you know. And the thing said, listen, I'm going now, but I'm coming back. And it was a thought. It was thought to you.
What did it say?
Why do you feel that I'm a threat to you? The truth is the truth and can't be changed. That wasn't the words it said. The threat to you, yes, but it was more or less saying the truth is the truth. All right?
Yeah.
Why is the truth a threat to you as well? And she got like vicious.
Do I?
Oh, shoot! Oh yeah, she can, man.
So is she
can go
possessed by
flip-flop.
something, or?
I don't know. That's what I'm wondering now. It certainly got her hissing and spitting like a fucking serpent.
Why do you say serpent? Is that just for dramatic effect?
Well, it was for, yeah. No, but that's the... that's how I saw it. That's all I can tell you. And through my art, it all started, as I said, when I was looking for something in the cupboard, and the cat went and got it for me. I couldn't believe it. I was like, cat can't fucking read.
Yeah, but the cat knew what was going on.
Yes, exactly. And then with them, I had to think in pictures. And then it thought back to me. I think it was the cat, I don't know, maybe it wasn't.
Some of these models that
Let's
are
go
out
drop
there,
these
we find
tapes
that,
off.
there's just really... All right, here's another good one for you, Mr. Carpenter. Hypnosis is one tool. I know when you're dealing with given to him.
Oh, yes, and in fact, some of the only things people remember are the little last remnants of an abduction experience. Like you suggest there, no lost time. Some people recall that they're being told now you can come upon that. The interesting thing you reported was the physiological detail, that the sleeping bag was cold. Certainly if he had been in it all that time, there would not be that sensation of a suddenly cold sleeping bag from the inside. Exactly. How did he know he had missing time?
He didn't, other than the fact that the sleeping bag was cold and that was in his mind, no lost time.
Mm-hmm.
That our brains actually record every detail that our eyes take in, and that this can be recalled under hypnosis, or is that a myth?
Well, it is true. You've heard of people with photographic memory.
Yes.
They can do that. I've been lucky to have a case or two that had photographic memory, and that was a real delight to work with. It was real obvious that they could go into great detail and remember much more than a lot of people could. And still you didn't find contradictions or great differences in the data, even with that. Improve it or add a few little things, but what I'm saying is we'd still probably get the basic idea correct. And all that makes you wonder whether there's some sense of survival for us or them or both. I think people's reactions to all of this reflect more of their personality.
That won't pick it up.
What the hell are you talking about?
The camera won't pick it up. The mic on that won't pick it up. That's what you're thinking.
What's happened?
You didn't hear it?
No.
I thought
Ground
you heard
shake?
that. It was boom, deep. It's deep underground booming. You couldn't hear that. Anyone could hear that.
That's your stomach.
Yeah, right.
What underground booming?
It's booming. It just went and you missed it. It's all that hair around you. That's the problem. You can't hear through it.
Something of another world. As George most interestingly reported, here they have it all.
So where's the test site?
Well, that Mount Range Mountain you're looking at right now.
In that particular, and
So where are all these alien craft? Where's the space? Where's the test site?
And again, that would seem related to the genetic aspect of this.
Oh,
yeah.
How many innocent possibilities
That whole area there is test site.
are there,
In the
do
distance,
you
yeah.
suppose, with respect to
That's
their
by the
That
hundred.
range of mountains,
in
you
other
see,
words,
Blaine, and you'll see a silo
if
come up
they're
out of there every
doing
so
genetic
often.
research,
Mate, sometimes you go a year without
finding
seeing it.
samples with
It's never
our
up for more than 9
genetic
minutes.
structure, or just sort of borrowing
People deny that there's one there, and I've got it on camera, so I mean, I know.
Well, that's
so.
a difficult question to answer.
I know.
Yeah,
Well, the
well,
situation
that's
is
kind of what
as
everybody
far as
wants
the
out,
sun
because I don't think there's any sure way I can answer
July.
that either
So
way.
you're saying that there's an underground
I
base
could
around
say
here?
A lot of underground
probably,
bases, there's underground
or
tunnels.
probably not.
Go from here all the way to New
I don't
Jersey.
know, I just don't really have a good answer.
RCA,
You
or well,
had
I think
quite a bit to do, did you not, with putting together some
ITT
of the
anyway,
questions
sure.
for the Robopol that
Definitely from here to Los Alamos is underground tunnel.
very controversial.
Yeah, a friend of mine says they're building a 3,000-foot elevator in a place near Los Angeles.
Dr. John
It's a
Mack.
3,000-foot elevator at the base of a mountain going nowhere.
Mercury goes down something like 6 levels.
I wasn't in so much in on the
3,000-4,000 feet.
because I'm as much as
Most of the
writing
rooms deep down in the rooms in here are what they call clean nukes,
and also
where, you know, they blast out the rock and you can go in 4 hours later, there's no radiation.
Psychiatrists and psychologists.
Carpenter is my guess. The program is Area 2000 from Las
Vegas. I'm Art Bell, and there's more in a moment.
Is that what the neutron bombs were designed for?
No, they killed people and left the buildings.
Jackie.
You see that hill there? It's called Lone Mountain. There?
The small hill?
Yes, or a small mountain, it's Lone Mountain.
That one there?
No,
Looks
there
like
on its own.
Yeah.
There used to be a load of those around, and that's where they dug out the bases and the tunnels back in the 50s with those big boring machines from the Rand Corporation. But when they removed a load of those to do construction further down towards town, they only dug them at night, put tarpaulins over them in the daytime for whatever reason. So you know they're hiding something. Like molehills.
Well, that's certainly a clue to something happening. If you're going to dig a tunnel, you would naturally assume there'd be dirt coming out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, not nowadays, because as I say, they just melt it somehow or other. There, look, if you look over, there's Vegas, and you'll see the pyramid.